Hey, I'm hungover, and I'm gonna listen to some Gordon Lightfoot.
When I walk the hills so high around the town where I was born, New York seems so far away, though I was there just yesterday. I have played on my guitar in coffee houses, halls and bars. Everyone that I call friend knows they will not be forgot.
Nice Twining's tea, some Twining's breakfast tea. Always nice when you're nursing a hangover. Hey, whoa, son, son. Yeah, I had some fun last night, nothing too crazy, just, had a few drinks, and before you know it, a few drinks lead to a few more drinks. And then you're hungover. We've all been there. Well, not all of us, but I think maybe 99.5% of the people watching my goddamn videos. Gordon Lightfoot, Canada's pride and joy. A national treasure in Canada. I guess you want to call him a folk artist. He's a folk artist, although the period that I like best, I feel he's a folk country artist. And the thing about Gordon Lightfoot is, I'm late to the party. I'm late to the Gordon Lightfoot party. I'll admit it. People were always recommending him to me. Everywhere I went, people were always like, you should listen to Gordon Lightfoot. He's really amazing. He's an amazing songwriter, amazing singer. You would like his stuff. People would always say, you would like his stuff. Because they knew I liked early Leonard Cohen. I love Leonard Cohen's first 4 albums. And I like country era Bob Dylan, in the late 60s, like Nashville Skyline and Self-Portrait. I actually like Self-Portrait's my favorite Bob Dylan album. I like his late 60s period when he started crooning more. And I actually liked those albums best. So people knew I liked country Bob Dylan. They knew I liked Leonard Cohen. They knew I loved outlaw country, that I loved Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson. And yeah, it kind of makes sense that they put all that stuff together and they're like, well, in theory, you should like Gordon Lightfoot because he's a little like all those artists kind of mixed together a bit. And, but for whatever reason, whenever I listened to a Gord song, I could hear that it was quality music, he's a quality singer, but for whatever reason, it just felt a little too mellow for me. And I just didn't connect with it. Not in the way that people thought I would. I was wrong. I don't know what was going on with me. But anyway, it took some years. It took getting knocked around by life a little bit. And I got to tell you, now he's easily one of my favorite artists. And the way that this happened was there was that documentary. There was a documentary that was on. I forget what streaming platform. Tell me in the comments section if you know what the streaming platform was. This was during the panorama, and I think we were in lockdown or something. So I watched the Gordon Lightfoot documentary. I thought it was a real interesting character. I didn't know he was such a hellraiser. That's the thing. I didn't know. And he had a lot of swagger. He was my kind of guy. I was like, yeah, Gord's my kind of guy. He's a good old boy. He might be from Canada, but I like his style. I like the cut of his jib. And hearing a lot of the music in the documentary, I was like, this is some pretty good stuff, So it was a combination of Gord's swagger and his style, and then just hearing a lot of his songs back to back, I just suddenly opened up to Gord. But I still didn't run out and buy his stuff. I didn't run out, buy his stuff, or get a buddy of mine to hook me up with his discography, which is what eventually happened. I made a mental note Gord's stuff is cool, and he seems like a cool guy, and he's still alive. And he was talking documentary. He's up there in Canada, still doing it, and I just had a lot of respect for him, and he seemed like a cool guy. But then, a few weeks later, I was going through kind of a rough period in my life, in my personal life, and I was sitting in a bar in Tampa. Drowning my sorrows, and Sundown started playing from the jukebox. Gordon Lightfoot's, I believe, his biggest or second biggest hit, Sundown, came on. And I'd heard the song a few times in my life, but there was just something about that night and Sundown coming in. And now I knew the history of the song too, because they discussed it in the documentary. And just between knowing the history and just the vibe and groove of the song, it's kind of swaggering, wistful country song. I don't know, it just clicked for me. I was like, this is one of the greatest songs ever written. I love this song. And the next day I contacted a good friend of mine. He knows who he is if he's watching this video. And I said, hook me up Gordon Lightfoot's entire discography. I need it all. I need everything he ever recorded. And a few weeks later, he finally pulled it off, and he gave me everything that Gordon Lightfoot ever recorded. So thank you, sir, for doing that. You know who you are. And I dived in. I did the deep dive. I did a major deep dive into Gordon Lightfoot. And by the time I was done deep diving, he had become one of my favorite artists. Definitely my favorite Hangover artist. I used to, I would listen to Neil Young, especially like folkier country kind of Neil Young during a hangover. To me, Neil Young was like the ultimate hangover artist. Or I would listen to some Waylon Jennings or Willie Nelson, little country era Dylan. Those were kind of like my go-to hangover guys that I would listen to when you're waking up. But these days, I gotta tell you, Gordon Lightfoot, he's my go-to guy. In fact, it's not even just when I'm hungover. And to be honest, I'm not hungover that much because I can hold my liquor. It's not like I drink every night. No, I keep it together. He's kind of my go-to morning music, just in general. Like, I wake up in the morning, like, hey, I love, I'm a rock and roll kind of guy. I love heavy metal, hard rock. I love funk and soul. I love rowdy outlaw country. I love a lot of kinds of music. I love jazz. But in the morning, I'm not like inherently a morning person. So I kind of need something a little calmer and a little more soothing in the morning. And I find that Gordon Lightfoot's voice, there is just something I find so soothing about it. It's masculine, but very calm and reassuring, which is funny because he himself was this wild, crazy guy that his life was always like on the verge of spinning out of control. But somehow, when he was singing a song, it all came together. Suddenly everything was very calm and centered when he sang a song. And between the lyrics, which are amazing lyricist, one of the greatest lyricists, I think, of the 20th century, his amazing, smooth, very smooth. That's where he's a little different from other folk artists. And I think because he started off actually singing jazz when he was younger. So he has a little bit, like Willie Nelson, there's a jazz influence to his singing where he croons a bit more. He has this lower voice and he croons. And there's something just reassuring about it. It's like he's every man's dad, uncle, older brother, and cool buddy. And he kind of just checks it all. You're just like, yeah, Gord's out there. Gord's got my back. He knows what's going on. So I find him very reassuring in the morning. So I'm going to go through every album he did in the 60s and 70s. I'm not going into the 80s and afterwards because even though I think those albums are decent, I don't think Gordon Lightfoot ever released a bad album. Pretty impressive. Not any bad album. And I do like those albums. And I do like, I like his 80s albums and the albums he did afterwards. But I gotta say, I do think his best stuff is in the 60s and 70s. And definitely he peaked in the 70s. And I don't think many people will argue with that. So I decided, I don't want this video to go on and on forever. So I'm just gonna go through all his stuff in the 60s and 70s. And that's still a lot of albums because he was a very productive man. I'm just going to go through this and talk about his evolution. So if you're someone who has not dived into Gordon Lightfoot, maybe heard a song here and there, but like myself, you're kind of open to things that are kind of maybe a little folkier or more country, then I'm gonna walk you through it so you can view this as an introduction to his discography while I'm drinking my Twinings tea and nursing a hangover. Let me move over here. I want to make room for the graphics up here. Soon there's going to be an album floating next to my head. Okay, that's good. That should be enough space. Okay, let's do this. Lightfoot with an exclamation point. Yeah, that's right. He means business. 1966. Lightfoot. It's great. It's a great debut. In fact, if we're talking just like straight folk, there's a little bit of country on this album. But for the most part, this is his folkiest album. It's a man, an acoustic guitar. It's very stripped back, but has a very nice, lush production, and his vocals and his guitar playing and songwriting are front and center. And I'd say if we're talking pure folk, with the exception of maybe some of his very later albums, I'd say this is the closest to just a straight-up folk album. And for the most part, I'm not a big folk guy. I'm not a big folk guy for the most part. But this is like my kind of folk. If more folk was like this, I don't like Dylan's early folk stuff. Like I like when he got more rock and roll and country, his voice his voice irritated me, and there was something a little too heavy-handed about the messages and stuff I felt in early Dylan. That's just not for me. I know it's important music and all that, but I don't like early Dylan, and I don't really get into too much folk music. But this I can get into. This I can get into. Starts off a great song, Rich Man Spiritual. My favorite track on this album, and I would say is easily the third track, The Way I Feel. Oh my God, that song's one of the most beautiful, haunting, darkly beautiful songs I've ever heard in my life. I love The Way I Feel, especially this version. There's another version, which we'll talk about in the next album, but this version, oh, it's just like, it sounds like nature. It just sounds like you're out in the woods, and it's like that moment of calm, like, whether the sun is going down or the sun is going up, and you're just feeling like you're part of something. This kind of beautiful melancholy of existence that you're kind of aware of. You're kind of aware of your place in the world and universe when you're standing out in nature, and you get that feeling. It's both beautiful and sad at the same time. Well, that's the way I feel. That's the way I feel. Like, to me, it feels like my soul is being expressed, and I feel like it's a lot of people's souls are being expressed in that song. But that's an amazing song. Early Morning Rain, one of his first classics. Great song. Now, that song's a little country-ish kind of folk. Amazing stuff. This is an amazing album, and it's a great debut. And if we're talking just straight folk, I guess this would be my favorite folk album. But already in his second album, The Way I Feel, yeah, it's called The Way I Feel. We'll talk about that in a second, why it's called that. 1967, Gourds already moving in a slightly different direction. He's bringing in a little bit more of a pop element here. I could tell that this is like that period when like Simon and Garfunkel start to take off and stuff, and so there was like, folk rock was a thing, and the Byrds and things like that. So you can hear that he's moving with the times. There's more instrumentation, more drums, guitars. He's adding in another layer, and it works. It's a little poppier. I kind of like the first album a little more, but this is still an amazing album. Walls, awesome song. Love the lyrics. Man, this guy just knocked out so many great lyrics. If You Got It's a really catchy kind of folk pop song. That's great. Minor Ballad, really nice moody song. Really like that. Song for a Winter's Night, another Gourd classic. Beautiful song that just makes you get a picture in your head, and you feel like you're at the place he's singing about. It's very cinematic. The Way I Feel, the second version of The Way I Feel. Now, this one is like almost subtly psychedelic folk rock version. That's what I'd say. It's the folk rock version of The Way I Feel, and there's drums and some guitar feedback, and it's awesome. I love it. I still like the other version a little bit better. To me, the other version is just a little more raw and it's just there. The soul's just there, which just has a few bells and whistles. But the bells and whistles are cool, and it still evokes feelings. It's kind of more of an urban feeling. Actually, that's the cool thing. I would say the original The Way I Feel is rural. It makes you think of nature. And this version makes you feel like city streets, like, being on your own, city streets. It's got kind of a midnight cowboy kind of vibe to it. And I love it. It works as a nice urban flip side to the other one. And it's great. Then we get to his third album, 1968, Did She Mention My Name? Now, this album goes more into that direction where he's experimenting with kind of a little touch of psychedelia. It's a little more, pop and rock in places. There's actually a couple of like kind of rock songs, but still folk. I would say it's folk rock. This is like a folk rock pop album, 1968. And it's good. It's very good. I like the first two albums a little bit better than this album, but this is a very interesting album. This is definitely his most produced album where there's a lot of bells and whistles. And I like my Gourd a little bit more stripped back. That's something I was discovering when I was getting into his stuff. And this is like, there's a little bit too much going on, and he's a little bit too versatile on this album, but it's still good stuff. Don't get me wrong. It's still a very, very good album, and maybe it'll grow on me more as I listen to it more. The title track, Did She Mention My Name, is a beautiful song. I love that song. Black Day in July is a cool song. Boss Man, that's a great song. It's a really good album. It's a really good album. And even if I like the first two albums better, I still appreciate what he was doing here. And it's just a cool experimental 1968 album, and I dig it. Okay, then we get to Back Here on Earth, 1968. I probably like this a little bit better than the last one, but not as much as the first two still. I don't think the songs are quite as strong as they were on the first two albums, but still a really good album. I still like it a lot. I think with this album is he was stripping things back. In fact, this is his most stripped back album since the first album. This is kind of taking his first subtle step into the direction that he's going to continue to go in the late 60s and early 70s. Even in terms of his looks, like you can see, he's starting to grow the hair out a little bit on the cover. Starting to grow his hair out a little bit. It's getting a little shaggier, a little scrappier. And I like this whole album. It's a good album. And I like the direction he's moving into. Although those first two albums, I still think have the best collection of songs so far. 1969, he did a live album, Sunday Concert, which is just him and a guitar. Great live folk album. Generally, live folk albums aren't too exciting, but this is pretty good. And, he sings really well and he shows you he can put it across live. And it's a nice Sunday album. Sunday Concert's a nice Sunday album to listen to. I dig it. If you want to hear what Gourd sounded like live in the 60s, well, there you go. Sunday Concert. And then we get to an album that has two titles. It was originally called Sit Down, Young Stranger, but because there was a certain hit on this album, they retitled this album and turned that hit suddenly into a title track. And that's If You Could Read My Mind. 1970, his first album in the 70s, If You Could Read My Mind. I prefer If You Could Read My Mind, actually, as a title. I think it kind of captures that cover a little bit better, because it looks like he's sitting there thinking, like, could you read this guy's mind, what he's thinking about? Well, let me tell you about this album. At this point, it's my favorite album he had released. So instantly in the 70s, Gourd takes his game up to a whole other level. I love that first album, and I really love the second album too, but this is better. At this point, this is the best thing that Gordon Lightfoot had recorded. He really got it together. I felt like he started to slip a little bit on those last two albums, and here he brings his A game. And he crafts just amazing song after amazing song. And he kind of hits the sweet spot. The songs are stripped back and intimate, but there's little hints of instrumentation and little production flourishes here and there, but it's done in a very subtle way that doesn't overpower the songs. They're just used to enhance the songs and give it a little atmosphere. It's a perfect production. His voice, his singing. It's still, I would say this is primarily a folk album, but it has some pop elements and maybe a little tinge of country here and there. I'd say it's mainly a mixture of folk, pop, and even a touch of like easy listening, kind of early 70s easy listening. If You Could Read My Mind. God, that is one of the most beautiful songs ever written. Beautifully sung, beautifully written. The lyrics, I love it. And it's all great. Everything about this album's great. It's like, oh yeah, Gourd, like he got it. Like, even though this is his first album in the 70s, I feel like it's really his last album of the 60s. I feel like it's everything he was trying to figure out, like a way to balance the pop and the folk and his other influences and exactly how he should be produced and how he should sing. I feel like on this album, it all comes together, and it's kind of his definitive 60s album that was released in 1970, if you know what I'm saying. I feel like this is the climax of that era. Then we have like two transition albums that kind of bridge us from the 60s into the 70s, and then we got full-on 70s Gourd. But let's talk about those two transition albums now. And this is where we actually start getting into my very favorite Gordon Lightfoot albums. I keep bouncing back and forth on which one it is. It's one of these four albums. There are four albums in a row that are all a contender for my favorite Gordon Lightfoot album. And the first one is 1971's Summer Side of Life. What an album. Everything he was working towards in the 60s and did with, Can You Read My Mind? He just takes to a whole other level. And this, I think, is a full-fledged masterpiece. Yeah, I think the last album was a great album. And before that, there were good albums. But this album is a masterpiece, and it's followed by three other masterpieces, in my opinion. And that's why I can't decide which masterpiece I love more. These four albums in a row are my go-to Gourd albums. So, Summer Side of Life, 1971. This is a transition album because you got some of the more lush pop folk songs and even a little touch of easy listening. But this is where he starts leaning into the country thing a little more than he had been doing. there's a little more of a scrappier country side creeping in there. It's not full-fledged there yet. This is why I consider this still a transitional album, but it's getting in there. Country Gourd is getting in there a little more. The title track, easily in my top 5 favorite Gourd songs. One of my favorite songs of all time now. I can't listen to The Summer Side of Life without choking up. There's just something so wistful and beautiful about that song. And it's sad. It's a sad song, but sad and beautiful. It kind of reminds me of the movie The Swimmer. If you've never seen the movie The Swimmer with Burt Lancaster, check it out. Because I feel like the lyrics tell the story of a man that's kind of like the swimmer. But it's also, it could be a metaphor for Vietnam. It uses the metaphor of war and life moving on and losing things, and I think it works on a political and an emotional level. And I think there's different interpretations. I'd be curious to hear your interpretations. But these lyrics, I mean, one great thing about Gourd is sometimes he can be very specific, but sometimes he's kind of cryptic, and it's open to interpretation. Even that phrase, "Summer Side of Life," I love that phrase, the song, the music. It's just one of the greatest songs ever, and that's my favorite song on the album. But right on its ass is my second favorite song on the album, Cotton Jenny. Wow, what a great song. And this is full-fledged country Gourd. I'd say this is the first song where he just really leans into the country thing. If you just heard this song, you go, that's a country artist. That's an early 70s country artist. And that melody, the way the guitars play, it's wistful, it's beautiful. This song makes me think of Junior Bonner, the film Junior Bonner with Steve McQueen. That's a great film, and this song just has that vibe to it. And I love Cotton Jenny. Same Old Lover Man, Waylon Jennings covered this song. And I might actually like the Waylon version a little bit better, but this is still great. And, Gourd wrote it, so, power to him. Love and Maple Syrup, that's a great song. This whole album's great. I highly recommend Summer Side of Life. It's a great hangover album, but it's also a great just any time of the day album, too. Then we get to 1972, Don Quixote. Don Quixote. Oh, sometimes I think this is my favorite Gourd album. It's hard to say. But like the last one, this is a transition album. I mean, look, he's got the facial hair now. He's got the shaggier hair. He's wearing like the cool looking like brown denim or suede. Maybe that's suede or it's denim. You tell me what you think that is. It's cool. I want to have a jacket like that. So he's going into the country direction even more on this album. And I'd say it's a little more stripped back than the last album. So he's stripping back a little bit because the last album, Summer Side of Life, had a little bit of that still kind of hangover of the kind of orchestrated pop folk side. A little bit in places, and the easy listening thing, a little bit in places. Whereas Don Quixote is stripping it back more, and it veers between a folk song and a country song, folk song and a country song. And all the songs are great. The title track, Don Quixote, I just really connect with that. I always connect it with Don Quixote. I'm kind of a foolish dreamer chasing windmills. And to me, this has that spirit. It's just a plucky, spirited song, and it just feels so natural and easy. Like I could picture Gourd just picks up a guitar and these songs just flow out of him. But yeah, he's really well crafted too. That's the thing about Gourd, and I appreciated this in the documentary, is you can see there's a lot of musical knowledge and craft to what he does. But at the same time, it just seems like it comes from him very easily too. So that's the sign of real genius, when you can do something that's both well crafted and organic and intimate all at the same time. He just kind of knocks out these perfectly written songs. And Don Quixote is like one of them. It's like an instant classic, and it always inspires me. I hear this song, and this is a song that feels like my soul too. A lot of his songs feel like my soul, and that's great. The great country song, Alberta Bound. Ordinary Man. Now that's my favorite song on the album. I love Don Quixote, and that's probably my second favorite, but this is my favorite song. Ordinary Man, I'd say it's a folk song. Oh man, it's just like kind of he's out on the road and he's missing this lady. He's still clinging to the ghost of her, but he's gotta stay who he is. He can't change who he is. He's owning up to it that, he's aware that because of who he is, he has less love in his life, but he can't change who he is. He's gotta be this scrappy outlaw that goes on the road and is true to himself. He's not an ordinary man. He's not that stable, regular kind of guy. He's not that guy. This is the essence of Gourd. And I connect with it. I guess it's the essence of me too. This is easily one of my favorite, a top 5 Gourd and Lightfoot song for me. And I get choked up. I get choked up listening to Ordinary Man because a man out there, wrote a song that expresses how I feel to such an amazing degree that how can I not get choked up? It makes me feel like there's things going on in life It ain't all just science. There's some shit beyond it where we're all connected to something and we ain't all alone. That's the thing. When I listen to Ordinary Man, I feel like, hey, I'm not an ordinary man and I'm not alone. Second Cup of Coffee. Ooh, I love that song. That's a great probably the greatest hangover song ever written. Second Cup of Coffee. I really love it. Great lyrics. A lot of humor. There's a lot of kind of subtle, dark humor to Gord's lyrics I really respond to. The song Beautiful. I've heard a lot of people talk about that. Beautiful. It's beautiful. This is probably the song that has a little jazzy element to it. It's a beautiful ballad. And it's sensual. That's the thing too. There's a sensuality which is also creeping in more so now, and he's going to get into that even more in the next couple albums. There's a sensuality to Gord's stuff which doesn't make it feel like kind of stuffy folk music. And Beautiful's this is like a song like it should have been a standard, like Frank Sinatra should have sang it. It's that kind of song. It just sounds like a standard. It's a beautiful song, and this is a beautiful album, and it's one of my go-to Gord albums. It battles the next two albums for the top spot. I can't say. If push came to shove, if I really had to pick what my favorite Gord album was, I guess it'd be this one. Old Dan's Records, 1972. Oh my God. Now the transition is complete. This is no longer a transition album. This is full-fledged 70s Gord. That's it. This is it. He's an outlaw country artist. If this was his first album, I don't think people would call Gordon Lightfoot a folk artist. I think they just call him a country artist. But because he had all those other albums before, he'd already established himself as a folk guy. Now, yeah, there's still a little bit of folky elements here, but not any more so than Waylon Jennings or Willie Nelson have. If you liked Waylon and Willie, you should really love this album and the next two Gordon Lightfoot albums. I kind of consider it his outlaw country trilogy. This is an outlaw country trilogy, and it begins with this album. I mean, even look at the cover there. He's even scrappier. It's got the toothpick. It's got the toothpick now, man. I love it. I love the album cover, and this album sounds like that. It sounds like the soul of a man with a mustache and a toothpick, and it goes really well with wood-paneled walls and old books and records behind you. It's just got that vibe. He captures the vibe of that magic when you dust off an old vinyl and you're listening to it and it connects you to the past. The past and present collide. So it's a very rich, beautiful country album with elements of folk. And this is, like I said, his first full-fledged 70s Gord album, in my opinion. Every song's great. Farewell to Annabelle, The Same Old Obsession. Beautiful song. This is kind of a folk pop song, but it has like everything. There's always, now at this point, everything has a kind of country or kind of scrappy, subtle edge to it. Even the prettier songs now, which I dig. I'm all about that. Old Dan's Records. Woo! Love that song. That's a good stomping kind of country song. Very catchy, very fun. Lazy Morning's a great song. Another great hangover song. My Pony Won't Go. Very minimalistic and kind of strange country song. I love it. All great. My favorite song on the album is the last song, and the song that, unless I had a copyright issue, was the song you heard at the beginning. Highway Songs. Another song that's easily in my top 5 favorite Gord songs. This song's amazing. And this is like the greatest song Waylon and Willie never happened to sing, or Neil Young, Harvest era Neil Young. This has that vibe. And that's, if you love Neil Young's Harvest, you should definitely get this album and the next two Gord albums, in my opinion. This song, it just has the spirit of hitting the road. You're just hitting the road, going from town to town. There's a venture, on the horizon. And I love that feeling. The feeling when you get up in the morning and you're about to go on a trip, like a long road trip, like across the country, that excitement you get? Well, this song captures that. And I love the steel guitars. One thing is, I love 70s steel guitars. Love it. I just love the sound of a 70s steel guitar in this great steel guitar solo at the end. And I'm getting excited just thinking about this song. I want to hit the road, man. Highway songs. Let's do it. Let's live life. It's the spirit of life, man. And I love this song and I love this album. Old Dan's Records. If I really had to pick, I'd say this is my favorite album of his. But those last two albums I really love too. And this next one, perhaps his most popular album. I don't know. Tell me in the comment section if this is his most popular album. I feel like it might be. 1974's Sundown. Sundown. Yes, that's the song that got me on this Gordon Lightfoot kick. And this is an amazing album. And yes, look at Gord there, looking cool. He's got the sandals on. He's really got this kind of hippie country guy thing going on now. And again, like if you like Harvest Neil Young or Waylon Jennings from this period, there's no reason why you shouldn't love this album. And this album is just amazing song after amazing song. He was in a very crazy period in his life where he was starting to drink more, and he was having a very tumultuous affair with this woman who might have been bad news. And then he kind of became bad news himself. Watch the documentary and you'll know all about it. It was a stormy time in his life, and he was really becoming a ne'er-do-well. But as sometimes periods like that do, it inspires great art. Objectively speaking, if I was to tell you what is his best album and what's the album that someone getting into Gordon Lightfoot should get first, I'd say it was this album. Sundown should be your album to get. It's like Neil Young's Harvest, that this is the definitive statement, his definitive statement of the 70s, and I think which was the peak of his career. So this is the peak. This is Gord's peak, and it might be my favorite. Like I said, I really bounce between this and the last three albums. The Summer Side of Life, Don Quixote, Old Dan's Records. In this album, Sundown, they're all masterpieces, and I listen to them a lot, like a crazy amount. They've helped me get through certain times in my life, and they're still helping me get through things, and just life in general. Sometimes it's just very comforting to listen to an album like this, and it's just it's one of my go-to comfort albums now. And it's weird because I've only got into them like this past year, and it's already like this is a comfort album. Like it's just, I kind of know it inside and out because I've listened to it so much now. And this is, again, it's a country album, in my opinion. It's a country album with a little bit of folk. Whereas like Summer Side of Life, he was like, in Don Quixote, were like folk albums with a little bit of country. Well, with this album, Old Dan's Records, and the next one, it's like it flips. It becomes country with a little bit of folk. That's how I kind of see them as being different anyway. Every song is very melodic and catchy and memorable. Somewhere USA, great opener. High and Dry's great. I love Seven Island Suite. Now that's a kind of, almost sounds like a song David Crosby would write. It has a nice ocean vibe, kind of folky, epic song. It's 6 minutes and you never get bored with it. Love that song. Beautiful harmonies, and even the harmonies sound kind of Crosby, Stills, and Nash. A little different from the rest of the album. That's great. The Watchman's Gone. That's my favorite song on the album. Yeah, could be, what did I say my favorite Gord song was? Did I have a favorite? My top 5 is starting to get crowded. There might be too many songs in my top 5. Yeah, I'd say this is my favorite. Okay, now I'm saying, I don't remember if I said another song was my favorite, but this song is my favorite. This is my favorite Gordon Lightfoot song. Kind of like Ordinary Man, this is a song that kind of sums me up. It's different though. Whereas that focused on himself, this focuses out on the world he lives in. This world that kind of tries to control you, that tries to put you in a box. And like the Watchman's like the man, in my opinion. Like that guy looking out and saying that you can't do that in your life. And there's a lot of watchmen in the world. Maybe even a bigger sense, it's God, because it deals with mortality as well. This idea that you're going to keep on kind of being yourself, and maybe occasionally when the watchman's not there, when the watchman's gone, maybe you can slip some cool stuff in there. Maybe you can get away and not be part of the herd, and you can get away and be an individual and do these cool things when the watchman's not looking. You can get one on him. And if you can do that, if you live a life where you can kind of get one on the watchman every now and then it's a good life. And like, you can't ultimately beat him. It's like you can't beat death, but you can ultimately live a cooler life than most people if you're kind of street smart and a little brave. If you got some bravery in you and you don't want to just, be a sheep. Tell me what you think the song is about. But that was my interpretation of the song, and just the melodies and the richness of the music and the guitars and the lyrics, everything. This song just evokes a lot of feelings for me. And it's interesting because it's definitely not a ballad, and it's kind of a country folk song, and it's upbeat, but it's unique. It's a totally unique song. It just sounds like a Gordon Lightfoot song. It doesn't really sound like anything else. And it's probably my favorite lyrics ever in a song. And it's probably the song, it's definitely one of my favorite songs, period, of all time. And I love it. And Sundown, right after it. In fact, this is like my favorite part of the album, are these three songs back to back. Watchman's gone, and then Sundown. Oh, that amazing song that I talked about earlier, and one of his biggest hits, and it could be his biggest hit. It's either this song or a song on a subsequent album that's his biggest hit, but this is definitely one of them. And you've probably heard this song a few times in your life, and it's just a great country pop song. That's how I would describe it, but it's got swagger to it and groove, and it's about guys in a bad relationship with a woman who's messing around on him and breaking his heart and making him think dark, shady things perhaps he shouldn't be thinking. It's a masterpiece, this song. Sundown's one of the greatest songs ever written, and every time I listen to this song, I get a feeling from it. It's like the country version of Angel Eyes, Frank Sinatra's Angel Eyes, not in terms of the music or the mood, but like in terms of the lyrical content. It's a dark song. It's a very subtly dark song, and I like that. I'm a dark guy sometimes. And then we get to something that's pretty much the opposite, which is Carefree Highway, which is probably the second biggest song from this album. Carefree Highway is just kind of like highway songs on the last album. This is just pure joy, like the title suggests. It's carefree. This is a pure joy. It's like if he was in a dark place in Sundown, now he's letting go of that shit. He's letting go of the darkness, and he's embracing the light. And I love the light as well. You gotta have both in life, dark and the light. That's what makes you an interesting person. So Carefree Highway, beautiful melody, joyful song. It's just pure joy. If you don't love this song, you don't have a goddamn soul. Sorry, I feel sorry for you and your soul that you don't have. This whole album, it's a masterpiece. It's great. It's the album you should start with if you're going to start with a Gourd album. And then we get to his next album, which is Cold on the Shoulder from 1975. Now, I'd say, even though I don't think this album is as strong as the last four, I'd say it's my fifth favorite album of his. If Sundown's like his peak, like his best collection of songs from the 70s, and I kind of feel like that's his peak, this is definitely the peak in terms of how country he would get. This is his most country album yet. Actually, even afterwards, he never would be this country again. There's a little bit of folk in here, but again, not any more than you would get in a Willie or Waylon album. This is a full-fledged country album. Just look at the album cover, too. He's got the blue denim, cool shirt there. It's guitar to some lady in the back in the shadows. That's cool. It's a great album cover. I love that album cover. Bend in the Waters. It's great. Stomping Your Feet kind of country song. Love that. Rainy Day People. Great song. Sounds like a song that Waylon Jennings could have sang. It's a great country pop song with a great melody. Love it. Cold on the Shoulder. Another great country song. Love this album. I love this album. Like I said, I'd give the 4 before it an edge. I think the songs are a little stronger, but this whole album's great. Love it. Great country album. So pretty much, if you like Sundown and Old Dan's records, or love them, which you should actually love them, then you'll like this album. That's what I say. If you love the last two, you'll like this album. I'll be your Amazon algorithm for you. Then he actually released a compilation, which I am going to mention, Gourds Gold, because it's essentially like a greatest hits compilation, but he did an interesting thing where he re-recorded all of his 60s stuff. Because by this point, he had this, like I said, more outlaw country sound. So in the 60s stuff sounded a little more lush and a little folkier. And I think he wanted the stuff to blend together more, so it sounded more like a cohesive album. Plus, I feel like he just felt that this represented him a little bit more than his earlier stuff did, I guess. If you have all his stuff and you want to hear kind of a 70s, more stripped back country version of some of his earlier songs, then get this album too. It's one of the strongest greatest hits albums you'll ever hear, because it's just great song after great song after great song. If you don't want to dive into his discography, then yeah, get this. This would be a good introduction. Although personally, I think this does not sum him up. Even with it being a double album, there are so many great songs that aren't included on this. So really, you should just get his albums, in my opinion. Then we get to his next studio album, which is from 1976, Summertime Dream. Another really good album. Again, I don't think he really does masterpieces after Sundown, but these are all really good albums. Yeah, this is a very good album. If anything, he kind of brings the folk back here. This is where he starts bringing in the folk side more, and it starts to flip back again. The kind of where it was with Don Quixote and the summer side of life, where it's kind of folk and some country and even some pop and different kind of stuff. It has one of his biggest hits. God, he released his greatest hits like right before one of his biggest hits. Kind of like the Eagles did that too. The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, which is this great story song. Kind of has a Irish kind of sound to it, an Irish folk kind of quality to it. And it's about this ship that went down, and it was a big national tragedy that happened in the mid 70s around this time period. And Gordon wanted to do a tribute to the poor people that went down on that ship. So he sang this very moving story song, epic song, 6 minutes and 30 seconds about the ship that goes down. And it became like a surprise hit, one of his biggest hits. People love it, and it's an amazing song, and it evokes feelings, and it's cinematic. It's a movie. Why don't they make a movie about the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald? Better than the film Titanic. Yeah, I said it. This song is better than that movie. There's never been a greater piece of art about a big boat going down, in my opinion, than this song. It's amazing. The first song, though, is amazing, too. Race Among the Ruins. Love that song. There's a slight touch of rock, pop rock to some of these songs, too, which he'll explore even more in the next album. Summertime Dream, beautiful song. I love the last song, Too Many Clues in the Room. Oh, that's interesting. That's another song that I just kind of describe as just a Gordon Lightfoot song. It's kind of folky, country-ish, and pop all kind of mixed together in a very seamless, unique way. Like I said, it's just a Gordon Lightfoot song. It's an epic song. Great way to end this very good album. This guy, Gordon Lightfoot, knocked out a lot of really amazing albums in the 70s. All right, and now we're getting into the last album I'm talking about. Endless Wire from 1978. His last album in the 70s, and I think his last great album, in my opinion. Again, I think his stuff in the 80s is decent, but this is his last great album, in my opinion. And look, check out that album cover. Check him out. That's peak Gorge, all right? Look how badass he looks. He looks like he should be in Blue Oyster Cult. The shades and the stash, the hair, just love it. I mean, to me, he's more than just an amazing songwriter and musician. He's also a fashion icon. He just looks like a badass. Just look at that expression too, man. And this album, it's amazing. I'm surprised more people don't listen to this album. In fact, I think it's better than the last one. I liked Summertime Dream. I thought Summertime Dream's a really good album, but I think it just missed being a great album. Whereas this, he's back to making great albums again. What's interesting about this is he brings in more of a pop rock element on this. And actually, he brings back a little more of the country, too. A little bit more of the countryside, which kind of receded a little bit with the last album. He kind of brings the country back a bit more while mixing in some pop rock and even some mellow kind of 70s easy listening. It's a very interesting mixture of styles. And right out of the gate with Daylight Katie, it's an amazing song. It's kind of a wistful kind of 70s mellow pop song. That's what I say. It's kind of like 70s easy listening with a tinge of country to it in the chorus. Like Gordon, a lot of his songs evoke nature and evoke the ocean. And this is a song that kind of evokes that. It evokes the ocean a little bit. It's a beautiful song. Hang Dog Hotel Room. That's like kind of a country rock song. Another one of his scrappy kind of on the road, traveling, kind of touring the country kind of song. Love that. Endless Wire, the title track. Whoa, very interesting song, and I love it. And this sounds kind of like a Blue Oyster Cult song, so he doesn't just look like them on this album. Kind of sounds like a BOC song, actually, Endless Wire. It's kind of a pop rock song. It has like a lead guitar, electric guitar line in there. It's a very interesting song. I would say this just sounds like something that would be on Endless Wire. Endless Wire just sounds like a song that would be on Endless Wire, maybe a Blue Oyster Cult album. I like it a lot. A really interesting pop rock song. This whole album's great. So it's a great way to end the 70s, in my opinion, and an underrated album. And after you get all those other albums I talked about that I sang the praises for, get this album too. And that ends his 70s stuff. And man, what a decade. What a decade of amazing music. And like I said, if you like country, if you like folk, if you like a little 70s pop rock, if you like 70s pop rock, if you like stuff like the Eagles, Fleetwood Mac, I think if you like all that kind of stuff, there's a good chance that you'll like Gordon Lightfoot. And sometimes just certain things hit you at a certain time in your life, and then they stay with you. And now, I'm a lifelong Gordon Lightfoot fan, now. He's just with me. He's with me for the rest of my life, It's got perfect, scrappy, middle-aged guy music. So, I'm into it. And thank you, Mr. Lightfoot, for recording so much amazing music and writing all these amazing songs. I already feel my hangover has receded. Just talking about Gordon Lightfoot helped my hangover. So, that's it. I'm Edwin Canistracci. And next time I'll probably be talking about hard rock or heavy metal band. But hey, I like a lot of different kinds of music. Deal with it. Rock and roll. Bye.